this is part of the Young Change Agents Digital Boss Victoria program, which is funded through a grant from the Victorian Government Department of Jobs, Precincts and Regions. And we are very excited to have you here this evening. This program is aimed at helping young entrepreneurs build their first digital business or build a digital business or social enterprise. And we are joined this evening by the founder and chief generalist of Generalist World, Millie Tamati. Millie is going to talk to us about the entrepreneur skill set. And enough of me nattering on. Millie Tamati, kia ora, welcome, over to you.
Kia ora, g'day, hello everyone. Cool, so hello everyone, my name is Millie. I am the founder of Generalist World. We're a community that offers support, education, resource and opportunity for career generalists from all over the globe. I can see in our gallery view, I can see Leo, he's actually from the community. I can't quite see everyone, but if there's anyone from Generalist World, hello, and great to see you. So first up, thank you so much for being here and joining me and taking time on your Wednesday evening. My early entrepreneurial journey was actually shaped in Melbourne. So it's really cool to come back full circle. Over the next 45 minutes, we're going to be talking about what a generalist is, and we're going to be really leaning into understanding what are generalist strengths and how can they supercharge a business. As Pete said, I would love for this to be as interactive as possible. So if you do have questions along the way, just feel free to pop them in the chat and I will try to get to them as soon as I can. Otherwise, we have a whole segment at the end, a Q&A segment. So if you prefer, we can also save it there and we'll get some interactive chat going. All sound good? Awesome, we got some thumbs up. All right, once again, I am Millie and I am a generalist. That doesn't just mean I'm a jack of all trades. You've probably heard that saying, right? A jack of all trades is a master of none. The first thing I would like to call out in this workshop is that is not the full quote. The entire saying is a jack of all trades is a master of none, but is oftentimes better than a master of one. Being a generalist goes much deeper than just being a jack of all trades. Being a generalist is a superpower that you, as a young entrepreneur, can tap into. It's a skill set that will help you imagine, build, and scale fantastic businesses. And that's what I'm going to explore with you in this talk. But first, I kind of want to start right at the beginning. I also can't see the chat. So Pete, if you could monitor the chat for me and just ping me if that'd be awesome.
Will do.
Okay. Do you remember the first time you were asked this question? I remember being in school, I was 15 years old, and I was asked to choose a path, history and geography or maths and science. And this path would supposedly determine the entire trajectory of my future. Talk about pressure. I chose the history and geography route, and I ultimately went with a Bachelor of Teaching because it was something that I was interested in, but not because I truly felt called in my heart to be a teacher. The truth is, I was really interested in almost everything, but I'd never heard or seen anyone follow a path that wasn't really linear. So as a young kiddo, I just followed that well-trodden path as well. But as you'll soon find out, that didn't last very long. So let's rewind. It's 2010, I'm 21 years old, and I've just got a degree that I feel somewhat indifferent about. With this degree under my belt, I book a one-way flight from New Zealand to Berlin. This was the first squiggle in my path. The really long story short is I ended up never coming home. Instead, I've traveled through 65 countries, creating this squiggly, meandering career that didn't look anything like a traditional career ladder, but it let me flex my generalist strengths. And right now I'm dialing in from a tiny island in the Scottish Highlands. We have a population of 170 people, and I've been living here and building my business for about 2 years. So prior to this, I've been a management consultant for women in construction. I founded a wine tour business in Australia on the beautiful Mornington Peninsula. I built a multi-million-dollar tour company from the ground up in Asia. I founded an illustration agency in the UK that actually had its first customer before I even had an artist to fulfill the order. It was a slightly stressful turnaround. And now I am building my own startup, Generalist World. I find myself kind of magnetically drawn to solving problems. When I find a problem that I'm intrigued by, I get hyper-focused until I can crack it. And then I'm hungry for the next one. Now I know that's one of my generalist strengths, but for many years, it felt like there was something wrong with me. Why couldn't I just choose, pick a problem or an industry or a job and just stick with it? And what if you were born to follow a squiggly line, a generalist path, not a linear specialized one? The thing is, the world of work is really not as traditional as it used to be. There are so many different ways to be successful and fulfilled other than this 9-to-5 career ladder. So I'm here to tell you what it means to be a generalist and how to use your generalist strengths to find your own definition of success. All right. So you're gonna be an entrepreneur. Honestly, I take my hat off to you. I was well into my 20s before I discovered this incredibly exciting, challenging, often all-consuming path of entrepreneurship. It's led me to lead a life that I have total ownership over. I've learned so much more about myself, and honestly, I get to build products that people love. It's addictive, it's draining, it's exhilarating, and often it is the path less traveled. And when you look around you, and your friends are getting jobs, and then they're getting promoted, and they are following the well-trodden path, and you're over here hustling, trying to make $1 online, you're probably going to have a moment like, what am I doing? But the way I see it, you have exactly one life to have an impact, to do whatever it is that you were put on this earth to do, to build, to create, to challenge, and to change the world. The path of entrepreneurship is not the easy one. And if you choose this path, you will have doubts and you will have doubters. You will spend many a Christmas with your great Aunt Maggie saying, "So what is it that you do?" You will hear over and over again that the path to success is through getting a job and being employed. And honestly, for many, this is exactly true. The path of employment is known for its security and its reliability, although with the recent wave of layoffs, this has become somewhat less so. But for some, we are born with an instinct to build. And I'm here to remind you that there is no such thing as one way to success. So, why are you here? I'd love you to take a minute to jot down in the chat, what is it that draws you to entrepreneurship? What is it that excites you or pulls you or compels you to this path? I'd love to hear. And let's see if I can get the chat working. Oh, cool, can. It's more fun, creativity, and innovation. The ability to build the future, yes. Freedom and creativity. Freedom's an interesting one. It's something I think about a lot. It's something I can relate to. I think for me, I see money and I see business as a vehicle to freedom, to being able to live this life on your own terms. So I can completely relate. Growing on my own terms, I'm a video editor, but despite having experience in 9-to-5, I realized it was not a path for me. Create the change you want to see in the world, beautiful. solving problems that not enough people are working on. Yes, we're going to get to that in this presentation. Freedom, creativity, control, making my own place. Freedom's coming up a lot. I hear you for sure. Dynamic, constant learning, challenge, and growth. Creating opportunities from problems. Yes, exactly. I love these. You're completely on the same page. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. Okay. The world is really changing at a pace that we have never seen. With the advancement of AI, technology, the way that we connect and how easily it is to connect with each other, you are stepping into a future which looks very different from that of your parents and your grandparents. And I would be lying if I said I knew what this future held. None of us do. But what I do know is that we are facing humanitarian problems at a frightening scale. War, climate change, inflation, inequality. These truths weigh heavy on us all. But I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that by embracing a different way of working together, we have a real shot at solving some enormous societal issues that we face. And by building a future where generalists and specialists work together in unison, I believe that real change is possible. And as the young entrepreneurs and leaders of tomorrow, this power quite literally falls into your reach. Okay, so I keep shouting about this generalist thing. What is a generalist? What is a generalist skill set? And how is it a superpower for business? In Generalist World, we have a community definition. It is someone who can A, knows how to do it pretty well, B, can figure out how to do it pretty well, pretty quickly, or C, can find the right person to help them do it. Now, you might be like, am I a generalist? And just for the record, I'm 31. I was 30 when I first heard this term. So it was a total light bulb moment. I wish I had heard it when I was 20. So you might be a generalist if you love learning new things and you know how to learn. This means that you often don't need to have direct experience in something to do something new. You just naturally can apply your hypothetical problem solving, lateral thinking, or conceptual reasoning skills to a new challenge. Maybe you'd rather have new challenges than deep mastery. Maybe projects just kind of lose their excitement after a while because you're not interested in going as deep as possible. You want to explore widely. Maybe your skills are a means to an end. For example, you might learn to code not because you absolutely love coding, but because you want to build something. Maybe you're great at connecting the dots and applying lessons from one area to another. And maybe you're comfortable with ambiguity and with not knowing the answer. This particular point was a revelation for me. I thought everyone was comfortable with ambiguity. It was really only when I started building Generalist World that I realized that is not true. Most people, a large chunk of the population are not comfortable with the unknown. So that was a light bulb moment for me. All of these strengths make you incredibly adaptable as a business owner. The thing is, you are a specialist just in learning, in cross-pollination and connection, in seeing the big picture, and in curiosity. And just for the record, being a generalist doesn't mean that you can't build a business in a particular niche. For example, if you're really interested in health tech, heck yeah, you can focus on one thing. It also doesn't mean that you can't become an expert or that you can't go deep on your favorite problem. What it means is that what you bring to the table is different than your specialist peers. Now, your superpower might fall under more than one of these categories, and being able to tap into and leverage it is really what's going to set you apart. We have a whole section on going into our superpowers. So this slide is just to kind of warm you up. All right, let's get down to business. Now that we've hopefully got a bit of an overview and understanding of what a generalist is and why generalist strengths are important to entrepreneurship and the future of work alike, let's dive into one of my favorite topics, building a business. And let's take Generalist World as the example. So to reiterate, I'm really happy to answer any and all questions. Just pop them in the chat as they come up. Hopefully, yeah, I can see them. So on this slide, I would say is a smidge of the typical things my day could entail. You see that they cross domains, they cross expertise and skill sets and interests. Some I know that I'm really strong at, and some I absolutely dread. I've been building Generalist World for about 8 months now, and we've been profitable since the beginning. I'm a solo founder. All of my assets are digital. So apart from software subscriptions, I have very little overheads, no office, etc. Well, my office, I'm in it right now, and it's my living room. So how do I decide what to work on and when you've got this huge range of stuff to work on during the day? The short answer is I think about it like what gives me energy and what drains my energy. I personally find energy in the big picture, in people and in creation. So I really lean into like strategy and content and community. Though things like small details, processes, logistics, they stress me out and they drain my energy. I'm able to do them, but I'm honestly not being the best founder I can be when I'm kind of bogged down by them. Hence why my first hire, which happened just yesterday, very, very exciting, did like a dance around my kitchen, is someone who is a whiz in operations and logistics. So it frees me up to be able to double down on what I'm really good at. So just on this point, being an entrepreneur requires a fairly deep level of self-awareness. Even if this isn't something you're really strong at now, you can really sharpen this skill by keeping a journal, reflecting on most situations and being like, how did I handle that? Speaking through things with like a career coach or a mentor can be really helpful as well. The goal is really to help you dig into the parts of the business that really light you up so that you can focus your energy on them. All right, of course, from the generalist perspective. Now, if you were to Google how to build a business, you would get, without exaggeration, tens of millions of results of pages. So I'd like to share with you a couple of tactical lessons from building Generalist World, with a focus on how tapping into my generalist skill set really helped me succeed. Okay, first one. In 8 months, Generalist World has generated over $40,000 Australian dollars in annual recurring revenue. We have spent $0 on marketing. How? 3 words: build in public. This means that on Twitter and LinkedIn, I am totally transparent about my revenue milestones, my goals, my successes, my learnings, and my wins. Now, why does this work? The thing is, you could build the most incredible business in the world, but if no one ever sees it or uses it, it will ultimately fail. But building a brand is never a quick win. What you're really doing is you're building a picture of your values, of your personality, and what you have to offer. Most of all, what you're doing is you're building trust, which is really, really quite hard to do, especially online. So I think of my time investment that goes into building in public as the long game. And this is where most people go wrong. They don't see instant results and then they fizzle out. And when you're speaking about stuff that you really enjoy and it isn't a chore, that's going to make your brand really sustainable. The truth is that people buy from people. More than ever, we are skeptical of brands and marketing mumbo jumbo. And building in public has been the most incredible lever to push my business forward. And what I want to share with you today is I think there is a huge gap for young entrepreneurs to fill here. If you can own that you are solving a problem that you really care about, That's a really interesting point of difference that will help you to stand out. And building in public has meant that I've had to draw on a bunch of my generalist skills, from relationship building to content creation, data-driven marketing and analysis, thought leadership, and connecting the dots to understand where to best spend my time. All right, all the hats. So earlier I'd mentioned that generalists love learning new things and they know how to learn. This comes in handy the minute you launch your business because, oh my gosh, there is always a lot to learn. Always. And honestly, no amount of courses or reading or even listening to workshops like this will actually prepare you for having to roll up your sleeves and build this company. And in the early stages, excuse me, of entrepreneurship, it's unlikely that you're going to have like lots of money to be throwing around unless you're very fortunate. So that means you got to get a little bit thrifty. And if you want a job done, you have to kind of do it yourself, or you have to know enough about it to bring someone else in to do it. I found this tweet from Olu, and it's absolutely spot on. You will develop a repertoire of skills, which I think of as good enough. They're good enough to get you to the next phase. And accepting that you can't be excellent at all the things is kind of one of the tough pills to swallow of entrepreneurship. And the best founders that I know do the exact same thing. They know themselves, they know their strengths, they set the vision, then they hire folks to fill gaps where they're weak. And then, really importantly, they get out of the way and they let those people shine. So if you're someone who enjoys learning, who picks things up really quickly, and you know how to learn, you're going to have a huge leg up in business because wearing many hats is an invaluable generalist strength. Now, at first glance, this one might not seem tactical, but I promise you it's essential. Entrepreneurship is a particularly lonely path. The only folks who truly know and understand and get the roller coaster of emotions that you will be going through are fellow founders. And I'm a firm believer that happy, healthy people build happy, healthy businesses. I really cannot emphasize this enough to make sure that your mental health, your physical health, and your support systems are in place, that they're rock solid, because that is absolutely essential to building a business that's going to last years. Unfortunately, burnout is really, really common amongst founders. So how do you find your people? Honestly, there's a bunch of ways, from excellent organizations like Young Change Agents, to online forums like Indie Hackers, to global communities like Generalist World or Trends.co. Finding your people and a happy balance of work output is just as important as finding product market fit. Okay, so how did you celebrate when you made your first dollar at Generalist World? Oh God, cool. Lots of questions. Honestly, so I live on this little island, so there's not like a huge amount of options to like go out and get tacos or whatever people in cities do. So it's a matter of just celebrating with my husband, a nice meal, and honestly, taking the time to celebrate by yourself kind of matters as well. Because again, no one really understands that like super excitement of what it means to actually make a dollar online, except for you and your fellow founders. So when something really, really cool happens like that, I do love just to take a minute, literally alone in a room, and be like, deep breath. That was awesome. Fair play. So yeah, but everyone celebrates in their own way.
We've got a question from Cynthia. We'd love to know more about building communities, especially to be able to delegate work in the future, but also create lasting connections.
Yeah, I could speak about this the community building side of things a lot, especially being able to delegate work. I think it comes back to knowing your strengths. I have a document which I call the everything doc, just a really simple document, an internal document on Notion, where every time I do something in the day, I bullet point it. Quick bullet point as a reminder. And it's a very, very, very long document. And the idea behind that is sometimes you get to the end of the day and you're like, what on earth did I do? I know I did a lot of stuff. And then it's really hard to actually delegate because you don't have any like data to back it up. So I like to keep the everything doc. And even if you just do it for a week, you'll get a true picture of how your days are spent, what's giving you energy, and where you could delegate. Hope that is helpful and answers the question.
And I guess the other part of that question would be, like in building Generalist World, how do you go about building those relationships with the members of the community?
Yeah, so people think of a community as something big, right? It's like, oh, it's a large group of people, which it is, but how you build that is through one-to-one connections. So the very early days, Generalist World started with me having 10 conversations with people who looked to me like generalists. And it's expanded from there. I don't know how many one-to-one conversations I've had, but it kind of depends on what community you're building. Specifically for Generalist World, as part of like our package, I actually have a one-to-one call that people can book at any time throughout the year. And the idea is that really when you're in the business of community, you're actually in the business of people. And being able to connect and bring people together, having really strong empathy for being like a really good listener, and then having strong empathy for what people are going through, their challenges, their struggles. That's going to give you a huge leg up when building a community. Cool. So if you don't know what you're great at, how can you tap into it? Even if you're brand new, just out of school, I guarantee there's going to be stuff in your background that either whispers or shouts what you're great at. And you can draw on any and all experiences here: work, school, sports, leadership, volunteer, family, or personal. Everyone has a unique set of skills that they bring to the table, but generalist skills often don't look that straightforward. So instead of like maths or physics, generalist skills are more like lateral thinking or storytelling or relationship building. And to really shine, you need to know what your superpowers are so that you can describe them, lean into them, and then make magic with them. So generalist superpowers are often just how you naturally approach the world. It's likely that you've felt unrecognized or unrewarded for this skill because it's usually not as easily measured. It's probably not going to help you pass a math test, but it is a really, really valuable strength when building a business. So let's have a think. I want you to take a couple of minutes to brainstorm either things or skills or experiences that you can do naturally and easily. They come really, really easily to you. You might even be surprised or confused that others can't do it because it almost doesn't feel like a skill. It's just how your brain operates. And it probably brings you a lot of reward, like intrinsic reward. And it almost feels like you're in a flow state. So yeah, Leo, that's coming up too. So have a little think, take a minute. And if you have something you'd like to share, feel free to pop it in the chat. It's always interesting when you start to dig into this because at first people are blank and they're like, oh, I don't know. I don't have anything unique or special. But then when you actually sit with it for a bit and you think of the wealth of experiences and things that you've done, things that you enjoy, they start to come up. So I would love to start hearing them. Starting things, putting ideas into action. Yes. An underrated one. I think you've actually got 2 points there, right? So you've got the idea in the first place, which is also a skill, but then to be able to put it into action is another really, really important skill. Planning and organizing things. I would love to work with you, Susanna. You would be the yin to my yang. That's amazing. A really, really important skill for a founder. Yes. Oh, Abhishek, hello. Spotting patterns between seemingly unrelated things. Again, a really hard one to measure. If you're going to try and explain that to someone, it's when you kind of, just kind of a tip here, when you realize that you have the skill, even if you're just jotting it down in this like exploration journal, try and find examples. Because when you say that to someone, they could be like, what do you mean? But if you have a list of actual real world examples of how that's kind of shown up in your life, that can be really helpful. So thinking of problems people might not have thought of. Nice. Novelty. Really, really important in today's world. And being critical of things and analyzing them to find their benefits and needings. Fantastic. Speaking of design, I've always been great in that creative work such as video editing, growing up pretty artistic and love drawing from a young age. It's helped me to get into graphics design and motion graphics, can pick up new digital art tools pretty quickly. Amazing. I mean, as I said, the world is changing so fast. And the folks who are going to do really well over the next decade and beyond are the ones who are adaptable, who can take their skill and then adapt it to whatever is happening in the world at the time. Bringing people together, especially online, that's fantastic. Again, really tricky to do. And the online element of that is a relatively new thing in the last few years, really. So that's an awesome skill, Noelle. Working stuff out, making connections between disparate context, idea creation, data analysis. Love that because they're all really different. That's a super generalist skill set, drawing from multiple different areas. Elaine says, feeling like it's okay to start even if I don't know absolutely everything. Comfort with ambiguity. Yes, Elaine. Leo, I found the Clifton Strengths framework helpful. So yes, 100% recommend Clifton Strengths. If anyone hasn't done that before, I know there's like a $50 one, but if you dig through their website a bit, you can actually get like a $20 one. And it's basically like, it digs into like your personality and your strengths. So Leos are adaptability, intellection, self-assurance, relator, arranger, and maximizer. All right, cool. So let's move on. Now, if you're sitting there and you're like, Millie, I have no idea what you're talking about and what I'm good at. That is okay, because it took me many, many years to uncover what I was good at and my superpowers and my strengths. And in fact, I'm still uncovering them to this day. So uncovering yours is just simply a process of exploration. So here's a few things that you can try. You can ask a few trusted friends, colleagues, and teachers for feedback about what you bring to the table. Sometimes what we're great at is really obvious to others, but just less obvious to ourselves. The next thing I'd recommend is just diving headfirst into anything and everything that gives you a chance to explore, experience, test, evaluate what you enjoy and what you're good at. The most accelerated learning you can ever experience is from getting on what I like to call the ground floor. So the very beginning of a business or a startup, could be your own, could be someone else's. Just getting involved, interning, immersing yourself in startups, that practical experience is going to teach you so much. And lastly, try keeping an exploration journal. Take note of all the things that spark your interest, your curiosity, or maybe that turn you into this like hyper-focused machine. Eventually, you will see patterns and you'll be able to connect the dots. And it's this note-taking and pattern matching that will really help you understand how you can thrive. Oh. Okay, Q&A. So I'd love to just have a bit of an open floor. We can talk business, startups, remote work, community building, generalist skill sets, whatever springs to mind. And I'm not sure if we can bring people up on, I guess you can just like unmute if you'd like. It'd be great to have, if you're comfortable having a conversation, feel free to unmute and we can just have a chat. Otherwise, the chat is also there.
Firstly, really awesome presentation, Millie. Big fan of the online community space myself, but I'd love to hear a bit of your journey in terms of like, how long did it take to actually turn a business profitable? Whether that was, months or years, and how did you keep the resilience and find the formula or the thing that worked for you, and how did you get there?
Yeah, great question. So as Pete said earlier, I've built a few businesses, some of my own, some of others. Some have done really well, some have been total flops. So the answer is, the more shots you take, the more chance you're just increasing your surface area of luck. If your first business doesn't work out, do not stress it. Most don't. Most really successful founders are actually second or third time. There's a fantastic guy I follow. His name's Peter Levels. He's the founder of like Remote OK and Nomad List. I think he's launched 70 projects and 4 have worked, to give you an idea of like, because you just don't know. It could be a fantastic idea. The market changes. How to keep resilience and how to keep that determination to keep going. It has to be something you really believe in, is what I think. I think it's hard, especially at the beginning. You might be making nothing for, months, potentially like even longer than that. So to get you out of bed in the morning, to have the excitement, it's Peter Levels. I can link him after this. To have that excitement, to get out of bed, to build, to keep going. You have to believe that what you're doing is actually solving a problem. Otherwise, it kind of will probably just fizzle out.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I do have a question as well. Sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
I think my question is, there is always a feeling like, I don't know how long I'm meant to work on something to see whether there's product market fit. Mm-hmm. How did you experience when to persevere, or how do you determine when to persevere versus when to stop and be like, this is going nowhere and let's call it?
Such an important question. I would say it's building a business is a mix of intuition and data. And as I said, you really don't know if the business is going to like kind of survive for 6 months or a year or longer. So to give you an example of my last business, the illustration agency, I closed that down after about 9 months because I'd got to the point where I was like, this isn't really going anywhere. It's not lighting me up. And the interesting thing was I had very early signs of product market fit, had the immediate customer 12 hours in immediately before I even had the artist to fulfill the order. But so I knew that it could make, it kind of depends what your goals are, right? Like it was called the Cartoon Crowd, and the Cartoon Crowd, it could make money. It would probably be a side project forever. It wasn't really bringing me the joy that I was seeking from a business, and it wasn't enough. So I think we all have like a finite amount of energy. We all have a finite amount of like bandwidth of what we can like bring to something. So I think it's really checking in with yourself along the way and knowing that, you give it a shot, but if your gut is telling you, you're not feeling it, or you don't see yourself doing this in a year, there is absolutely no shame in shutting things down. I think there's a bit of a stigma that comes with that, where it's like, oh, I failed. no, you didn't fail. You learned a bunch along the way, a bunch of how you operate, what works well for you, what's needed in the world. And then your next business will be better. So yeah, I would say shutting it down. I mean, on the one side, if, you know, maybe you're like a year in and you're getting no bites, and it doesn't even have to be revenue bites. Like if people just aren't interested, I think, you know, if folks are indifferent about your product, that's kind of a sign. If you can't find people who kind of share that excitement, a sign that you either need to pivot and find a different angle if you really believe it's a problem that needs to be solved, or potentially it's a time to move on. But I think my big takeaway here is there's no shame in being like, man, I gave that a great shot and it didn't work out. No worries. Onwards and upwards. Hope they can help, Elaine.
Former poker player and the author Annie Duke talks about how we celebrate resilience and how people never give up, and like that's the Hollywood story about like stuck it out eventually, you know, they succeeded or whatever. And she's coming out with saying like we should be talking the same way about quitting. Like knowing when to quit is a really important skill, and let's celebrate that the way that we celebrate resilience. So I love what you're saying there, Millie. Leo has a hand up.
I sort of keep it simple. I'm just wondering, what's like your top level mission statement for generalist world? Or in other words, like, why do you do it?
I do it because I desperately wished it existed when I was growing up. I think right now, Generalist World is really focused on helping kind of like mid to senior career generalists. And that's because, again, I've only got a certain amount of bandwidth to be able to build. But my big picture vision for Generalist World is what happens when we go into schools. What happens when we tell kids that there is multiple different ways of success and they can lean into their curiosities. They can study philosophy and become a doctor. You know, you don't have to have this one path to success. So my big picture is kind of a question. How many generalists are there? We don't know because we've been overlooked and undervalued and misunderstood forever. It's always the world is built for specialists because it's way easier, right? You pop a label on someone, you pop someone in a box, and it's so easy. It's really, it takes a bit of effort to understand the complexities of generalists. So we really don't know the answer of how many generalists are there. But my big motivation behind it is like, I am the happiest and most fulfilled when I'm free to be my generalist self. And that's flexing across, you know, it's solving problems, it's flexing across multiple domains. And that has a huge effect on my mental health. So I think the whole like generalist, if it resonates, it's often an identity. And so I think there's a huge power for Generalist World to reach generalists from all over the globe and eventually all ages, and support them, show them there's a path for them. Yeah, it's an interesting thought process, Leo. The thing is, the conversation around this hasn't existed. So it's great to have questions like this that challenge the current narrative. I believe Rebecca has her hand up.
Yeah, so you're speaking on being a generalist and there's just so many avenues, right, to explore. And I think like that's amazing, but also at the same time, like, I don't know, I felt like kind of overwhelmed at the same time because I'm actually starting, like, I don't know, quit my 9 to 5 and like I'm kind of just like starting everything from the ground up, just me. And like even today, like days like today, like I felt just really overwhelmed just to like get everything together. Like everything's on me. So it's just like, what do you do about that, you know?
Oh, I feel you. I think starting a business inherently is overwhelming. And it comes back to that point number 3, find your people. Find your people, because sometimes it feels, especially on the days where you're just like snowed under and you're like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? How do I even navigate through this? You need to look around you and know that you're actually not alone in that. I think that the validation of being like, okay, everyone is kind of struggling in this journey, not that it fixes it, but it certainly makes it easier. So finding those like groups and communities of fellow founders. And my next thing, I guess, would be, I'm not sure where you're at in your business stage, but if you can find support, maybe even start with the everything doc. Maybe it sounds like you've just got so much going on and it's even hard to identify where your time is like being taken and eaten up. So if you kind of start with that document, keep it for a week, and then you'll start to be able to bucket different jobs. You can also then start to see what the really interesting thing that came out from that doc for me was, I was like, I can automate this. Like, oh my gosh, Zapier, like what am I doing manually doing this? Automate it. And if you aren't super like clued in on automation, you can really hire someone. If they are clued in on it, it doesn't take them long to set it up. So automate where you can, delegate where you can. And there's a bunch of like virtual assistant websites that might be able to help you with that. But the first thing is really understanding where the overwhelm is coming from so that you can start tackling it.
Perfect. Thank you.
It's a super important point, Rebecca. And yeah, Millie, I love those answers. We've probably got quite time for one more question from Jesse, but I just want to add another couple of things to Rebecca's point. One thing, and Millie mentioned this, is like good enough. You know, there's an internal pressure or even an external pressure of like, this has to be perfect, or, you know, this has to be a certain level, and compromising that because it's, you know, this is what I can achieve with the resources, with the skills, with the time, with the money that I have, and knowing what good enough look like, I think can be really helpful. And the other thing that I would say is identity. Like, be careful of confusing your personal identity with the success of your business. You're an entrepreneur, your business can fail, you can still learn a lot, be a massive success for having tried it, for, you know, whatever successes you can. So don't feel like, you know, the business outcome is, don't take that as your personal identity.
Great point.
And Jesse, did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question. What if the project or the thing you're trying to convince to clients or people is in itself a generalist project? Like, it looks at a whole bunch of different aspects and kind of caters to all of them. For example, I'm in architecture, which is typically like something that looks at all facets and all sides of things, you know, like the construction, how people use the thing and all that. And I'm trying to make a business about inclusive architecture, you know, like making spaces where people feel included.
Awesome.
And I'm having a hard time convincing people that that's a thing to do, because everyone's coming back to me being like, you should be a specialist in, like, you know, how people with ADHD specifically use a space. Whereas I'm more interested in a generalist.
Holistic. Yeah, I see that. First of all, that sounds awesome. Super, super cool and really needed. I would probably approach it the same way I now approach my skill set, which is really owning it. And I think sometimes when, like, if you're presenting it and you're not quite sure of yourself, or you're not quite sure of like the product and what you're kind of pitching, then that kind of comes through in that pitch. Whereas if you walk in and you're like, this is why this is needed, it's actually better that we look at this holistically and from like a general approach. And if you come in with the confidence that that is the best way because of XYZ, especially if you can back this up with data or like research or like case studies that you've seen, I think that will hopefully put you on a better steading. Yeah, a really short wrap up from me. I just wanted to say thank you, everyone, for taking the time and also for being really active in the questions. My door is always open, really. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter. If you have any further questions or just want to have like a quick chat, door's always open. And I hope that this session could be helpful. Pete, thank you so much for inviting me to come and talk today. I really, really enjoyed it. So yeah, just thank you, everyone.